Hello and welcome to episode 12, the second in our second season of Nisht for Me, a podcast that examines the ins and outs of British Jewish culture.
Today, we've cozied up again because we're absolutely thrilled to be joined by special guests. We have none other than author and journalist Hadley Freeman here, our first dual nationality Jew on the pod. So welcome. We're so honoured.
Oh, thank you, Abigail and Arron. I'm very thrilled to be here.
So we're going to, talking of your dual nationality, we're going to get straight into your shtetl of origin straight away because, I mean...
This is something we did on our first episode, wasn't it? With some top trumps.
Yeah.
And we feel like your shtetl of origin will 100% trump maybe everybody's.
New York, right? I mean,
New York, the Upper East Side, baby, keeping it real.
Wow.
Is that the epicenter of the Jewish diaspora, do we think? That is
I mean, it's a bit, there's, I think, I don't want to get into that. That will start a civil war in New York. But for me, it is the epicenter. It is... You know, anytime you see a Woody Allen film, it's basically set on the Upper East Side. So for me, It is the epicenter.
I mean, seemingly to the rest of us sort of diaspora Jews as well, every cool famous Jew comes from New York, pretty much. I'm thinking if we were purely going down the top trumps route, mine would be Prestwich, and I think we've got money-saving expert Martin Lewis. Which is, you know, he plays a part.
He was my late mother's number one.
Really?
She loved him. She called herself a rate tart because of him. She loved that phrase.
A rate tart?
Yeah, because, you know, you shop around for the best rate.
Wow.
He was her hero, so
well,
don't knock him.
Okay. He's no Mel Brooks, but, well, you know.
This is David Baddiel's theory. I'm sure he's written this somewhere, but he also might have just said it somewhere, which is that if you grew up in New York in the late 20th century, as I did, or you grew up in America in the late 20th century, as I did, and you're Jewish, being Jewish seems really cool because you associate it with Mel Brooks and Lenny Bruce and Barbra Streisand and Woody Allen. Like, those are the cool American Jews. If you grow up Jewish in Britain in the late 20th century, you associate being Jewish with basically the end of the Metropolitan line, weird suburbs, being bullied at bus stops. It's like, it's not cool. So like in America, it's still seen as just kind of, you have this cool attitude about Jewishness, which to me, I find hilarious because when I think about being Jewish, I think about really dorky summer camps that my parents used to send me to, where no one did sports and everyone did arts and crafts. This is David's theory, which is that American Jews think being Jewish is cool. British Jews think being Jewish is nerdy.
It's pretty spot on.
We're trying to, you know, take ownership of that and flip it, aren't we? Flip the narrative.
Absolutely. Looking for the beauty in the nerdy. Yeah.
That's been our raison d'etre in life, I think.
I think so. But you moved when you were quite young, didn't you? You came over here.
Yeah, I moved when I was 12 to London with my parents, obviously. And then I moved.
So sorry to interrupt, where was your bat mitzvah?
My bat mitzvah, very proud to say, West London Synagogue with lovely Rabbi Hugo Grin, who was so delightful and so patient with all of us useless Reform Jewish kids that he used to record our Haftorah portions for us on a little cassette. So I remember going back to my Jewish summer camp. I was still going back to Maine to this Jewish summer camp and walking around with my little Walkman and hearing Hugo Grin reciting my Haftorah, and to the point that I can still recite it. Like I just memorized it so much. So,
wow.
Just a casual heimishe flex, just dropping that in there.
It's weird. It stays with you, though. We did the same. I was in an Orthodox shul, but it was exactly the same. We had they couldn't trust us to actually learn a different language, understandably.
No.
So it was just, we learnt it rote by tape, really.
Yep, exactly. I really
Hugo Grin, that's like celebrity rabbi as well.
I know, and I have looked for the tape because I would love to hear Rabbi Hugo Grin still doing my little portion for me, but I suspect I left it somewhere in Maine. But West London Synagogue is a beautiful synagogue, still a beautiful synagogue. So I was very lucky to have my bat mitzvah there.
Wow. And what about the dress? Tell us everything.
So it was obviously the full day, and the morning was at West London. And amazingly, my dad's family from France, and more amazingly, my mother's family from America all flew over for it. And we have all these pictures of these very elderly French relatives and various American cousins all posing around Marble Arch, where West London Synagogue is, and then buffet at my parents' house in West London, of course. I was wearing a little skirt suit my mother had bought me, very 80s, even though it was at this point 1991, from Cacharel, this little floral blazer and matching skirt. And then the evening was full American insanity, where my parents, for some reason, had rented out the ballroom in the Mandarin Oriental Hotel on Hyde Park, which is so luxe. And I invited all my school friends. But the weirdest part of the bat mitzvah for me was that, so I'd moved to London the year before from New York, and in New York, you two will be unsurprised to learn that half my class was Jewish. So, you know, didn't have to explain anything. I moved here, and literally no one in my class was Jewish. And I had to explain to all the girls what a bat mitzvah is. And they all turned up and they were still quite bewildered. Why is there this like basically a massive wedding for her 13th birthday? And so that felt quite odd, that there wasn't this sense of like a collective bat mitzvah experience we're all going through at the same time. It was just me. But it was still fun. I remember there was a DJ. I remember dancing to Purple Rain with my best friend from New York who came over. There was a caricaturist who gave me lifelong trauma by drawing me into a horse. And, you know, all the standard bat mitzvah experience.
Excellent.
Fabulous.
That sounds great.
So, because we were going to ask you what was the sort of biggest culture shock when you came over, you know, from this sort of, you know, sort of a life which was obviously replete with sort of Jewish life and friends and what have you. And then so your school obviously wasn't Jewish and you were the only Jewish girl in the class?
In the class. Not in the year, probably. I know there was at least one other. There was 100 of us in the year. But in my class, yes, always. And I remember like I guess in what we called the lower fourth, which was like the first year of GCSE, there was a French exchange. And I was just paired up with the only other Jewish girl on the exchange. And I remember noticing this, like I was like the token Jew. And it did feel a little odd. Like you know, my life, it's not like we were so observant in New York, but you know, you definitely took the days off for Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Passover, went to Hebrew school Wednesday afternoon, Sunday mornings. You know, other girls in my class were going through the same. And here it suddenly felt like I was a Quaker or something, like I was in some weird niche, slightly comical, you know, incomprehensible religion. And it
so
definitely compounded to the culture shock.
I love that they paired you up with the French Jewish girl as well, just to sort of be like, well, they can do their weird stuff together.
Exactly.
You know, they can do their weird Jewish stuff.
I actually looked her up the other day. I was thinking, what happened to her? Because for some reason I remember her name, and she's now a French influencer. So I felt proud.
There you go. Absolutely.
Well, maybe, you know, the collaboration led to great things to both of you.
Clearly.
On my French exchange, the mother did try to feed me crab sticks, and I didn't have the language to explain, because I think crab sticks are not obviously seafood because they're like fish fingers, aren't they? So maybe I could have done with a kosher Jewish one.
It comes in the grey area of like, fish is okay.
It's not, yeah. Anyway, I digress. So, but it's funny that you felt that way in West London. It wasn't like you were living in the sticks or what have you, but it's funny how that can happen.
No, I mean, it wasn't until I went to university and started staying with friends in, you know, Suffolk or Somerset, I realized how un-Jewish the countryside here is, which was something else I hadn't experienced. And also, you know, obviously how unethnically mixed at all it is in the countryside here. Is different from rural America, and you leave New York City, you will find people of other ethnicities. It was definitely a shock. It wasn't really till I was at university that I realized the Jewish places in this country are North London and Manchester, and that's sort of it. And that is very different from America.
That was a shock because I went to Jewish primary school. We both did in Manchester, so uni was really. And then my secondary school wasn't Jewish, but it was like a third Jewish pretty much. And then university was the first time though that I was sort of surrounded by non-Jewish people, and I was a novelty, and it was it was strange.
Yeah.
Mine was you'll appreciate this, Hadley. I did work experience at Tatler magazine when I was at university, and I think they only gave it to me because they realised I'd come down from Manchester for the interview. They I think they just didn't realise they got any applicants from anywhere other than the King's Road. And you did it with another person, another student, and she went to St Andrews, I think. And she asked me about where I was living, and I explained I was living in a kosher hall. And she was like, aha, so what is a Jew? She didn't actually know the noun. She said, what is a Jew exactly? And I was like, wow. Because I went to Birmingham, which was a very Jewish university. But it was only when I met, someone from St Andrews that I thought, wow, okay.
At my university, by the time I got to university, I'd been here for 5 years. And I think I just felt, in order to fit in, just don't do the Jewish thing. So I didn't join JSOC. I didn't join anything like that at university because I just thought that will make you other. Like you just want to get through as best you can. You're already standing out with your stupid American accent. Like
I think that's quite a British Jewish attitude sometimes. It's
totally.
like that I think that's quite a big difference between British and American Jews. We do try and hide it if we feel a little bit uncomfortable. We've got more of that instinct in us. I think
so.
Yeah, totally. And understandably, this country, I mean, we don't need to get into all the depressing stuff, but it is something I think about. This country was obviously closer to World War II than America. And, there's a lot more kind of intergenerational trauma, or people feel closer to what happened here than maybe they do in America. A lot of American Jews, like my mother, her family moved to America from Europe in the 19th century. Like there was no connection to what happened in Europe in the 20th century for my mother's family. Very different story from my father's, but we don't need to get into that.
We will be. That's coming. We love a bit of intergenerational trauma.
We like to get start up and then nosedive down.
But I would think, of course, British Jews feel more of a sense of, play it down, be quiet. You don't need to be out there leading with the front foot like Mel Brooks. Like, of course, it makes total sense why it would be that way in this country.
There's also just so few of us in comparison, I think, as well.
Absolutely.
Like the critical mass, in America, like it still amazes me. I remember going to visit America when I was younger and going to Florida, I think, at Christmas time, and every one lamppost had something that said Merry Christmas, and the next one Happy Hanukkah, and the next, I was like, whoa, what is this place? It was amazing.
What you didn't realize is you were walking through a giant Jewish retirement home in Florida. So that is what it's like.
So what is your favorite Jewish memory from your childhood?
Oh, interesting. I loved doing the plays, definitely at Hebrew school. I can still remember all the songs. I went to Temple Emmanuel, sort of on the corner of Park Avenue, and I still can do all that. I loved doing Friday night candles at my Jewish summer camp in Maine that I would go to for 8 weeks every summer. That always felt very special and cozy. I loved it when my mother would have like our aunts and uncles over for Passover, and we would sit around the table. And my cousins in DC, my mom is one of 4, so I've got cousins all over America. I have some very observant cousins in DC, and I used to love going to their house at Hanukkah, like over the Christmas vacation from school. We go there for Hanukkah and hearing, them being able to do the Hebrew so well, and me thinking that sounded quite cool. So yeah, I love it. There was no bad Jewish memories from my childhood. I'm very lucky in that way.
Kind of fills you up a bit, doesn't it, in your childhood, all those lovely things.
I remember visiting New York. I was probably already kind of 15 or so was the first time I'd been, but being excited by kosher hot dog stands as well on the corners of pretty much every street, and they've all gone though.
I know.
They sort of don't seem to exist anymore. It's now kind of it's mainly sort of kebabs and shawarmas and stuff. Yeah.
Why is it? Why have they gone?
I don't know. Because I don't think it was sort of Jewish peddlers selling them when I was 15. I think it was just the sort of big brand.
It was Hebrew National, right?
Well, it was Shofar hot dogs. Seemingly.
Oh, okay.
It was the big one, but they've all gone.
Another thing to be depressed about.
Yeah. Talk about the serious issues in this podcast, the big ticket items.
So you did touch on your father's family, and I wanted to. You've written a number of books across the spectrum of subjects, from 80s movies, and your most recent book, Good Girls, is a very kind of powerful, brave account of your anorexia. But we wanted focus on your 2020 book, House of Glass,
Mm-hmm.
because we think if our listeners haven't already read it, I think they would find that one especially interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So the House of Glass is story of your grandmother on your father's side and her siblings.
Yeah.
Sala Glass, or
Yeah.
the later Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to tell our listeners who are not familiar with it a little bit about it?
So my grandmother was the youngest of 4 children. She had 3 big brothers. And I grew up always knowing sort of a little bit about her. I knew she'd emigrated from France to America, and that's where she met my grandfather, and then had my dad. And she always seemed a bit sad. And I knew I had these 2 great uncles in Paris who I knew, Henry and Alex. And there was another brother who I didn't know. And I just, I didn't really know how to handle my grandmother because she always just seemed very sad. And after she died, I just started thinking, she died in 1994, and I was sort of always thinking I should write something, I should write something maybe about my grandmother. And then in the 2000s, I was working at The Guardian and writing for Vogue, and I thought, oh, maybe I'll do something about her relationship with fashion, because she always dressed in this very French way, and I thought there was something interesting about identity. And so I went to her apartment where my uncle, my dad's younger brother, still lives. And I was going through her closet, and like all great Jewish stories begin, I found the shoebox in the back of the closet. And in the shoebox were these photographs of someone in what was obviously a concentration camp, various letters between her and some famous fashion designers and also her brothers during the war, various metal plates from a prisoner of war, some torn up photos, and a very old childhood album of photos of children in what turned out to be the Polish countryside. And that began this 18-year research project of me finding out the truth about my grandmother and her 3 brothers. And the short version of that is they were all born in what is now Poland, in Galicia, just down the road from what is Auschwitz. And they all moved to Paris after World War I because their town in Poland was the first town where a pogrom was after World War I. So they fled to Paris. And as the war was coming to Paris, each of them went in different directions. So I traced what happened to each of them. So that is the story of how I spent literally 20 years of my life.
Wow.
And I just want to say, and I'm not just saying this to blow smoke up your ass. And I think you've said this, in the press you were doing around the book, that, a lot of sort of Jewish people have amazing stories of their family because of, and their ancestors. But it's the way you tell it. I mean, the book is so compelling. It is so, I remember sort of ripping through it at the time and gifting it to people, because it is, you completely drawn in, and the way you tell it is so beautiful and it's so compelling. So
thank you.
18 years well spent, I think.
Absolutely.
Did you have no idea of her history prior to that shoebox revelation?
No, not really. I knew a little bit. So her older brother Alex, who I did know, who died in 1999, he had various stories which none of us believed. And I don't know why none of us really believed them, because the evidence was right there in front of us. I used to go to his house for lunch on Avenue Foch. I'd go to Paris as a kid and as a teenager, and you go to his apartment and it was filled with the greatest artistic masterpieces of all time. There was a Monet water lilies in the dining room.
Wow.
There was this double-sided Van Gogh in the living room. There's a Matisse in the bathroom. There was about 10 Picassos all over the apartment. I mean, it was the most incredible place. But he had these stories that all of us just thought, oh, that's Alex being ridiculous. And yet I managed to, I didn't. My uncle, who lives in my grandmother's apartment, found this unpublished manuscript that he'd written that he'd sent to her, which is his autobiography. And then using that, I went around to all these archives around France and Poland trying to match it all up. And it turned out everything he'd said was true. So I knew that much, but I didn't know really anything about the other brothers, and certainly not really about my grandmother, because she just didn't talk about it. There's this cliche, I say it in the book, and so apologies for repetition, but the cliche, Jews always going on about the Holocaust, blah, blah, blah. But I think that's really us, the younger generations, who are so obsessed with it, whereas those who lived through it were so traumatized that they never spoke about it. And then their children, like my father's generation, picked up on the trauma and knew not to talk about it. So it took us, the busybody, sharp-elbowed third generation to really get out there and start talking about it a lot.
Wow. makes me think I need to start keeping better stuff in shoeboxes.
No,
My grandkids
seriously.
are just gonna like go through my wardrobes and just find shitty shoes
Yeah.
No, it's incredible. It's incredible. I mean, what you talked about your grandma's sadness. So
Mm.
what you said you found her sort of what how was she with you, you know?
She was needy, I would say, but in a way that it wasn't like voiced. It was just like she was always like trying to grab at me and hold me, and she looked
Oh,
sad
really?
a lot of the time.
Oh.
And I write in the book it's sort of the kernel of this idea, although that seems a bit highfalutin to say that because I was 5 years old at the time. But when I was 5, my father took me and my sister, my mother, to France, and it was the first time I'd been, and it was to see my grandmother and her brothers, and we were all meeting up in Normandy, and in Deauville, and I remember seeing my grandmother walk into the dining room where we were all there. It was me and sister and her older brothers, and her looking at us and crying and turning around and
Hmm.
walking out. And I just always remembered that image, and my
Sure.
father going after her. And my father always looking after her, like when she'd come to visit, he'd like sit and sort of like stroke her and kind of like, try to reassure her. She was obviously just unhappy. And she and my
Mm.
grandfather used to kind of like bicker a lot.
Mm.
Um, and it was just sort of it was sad to see. And
Yeah.
it wasn't like my grandmother was walking around like, wailing and keening. I don't want to make it sound like
Sure.
that. Like she was very fashionable. She was always incredibly glamorous. She had a life, definitely, but it just didn't seem like the life she wanted.
So do you
Um,
think that was why you felt kind of compelled to do this story to sort of kind of figure out why she was the way she was?
Yeah, and also, American Jews, we go to Hebrew school and we're constantly being told the message, the Jews who came to America are the lucky ones, we're the lucky
Mm.
ones. And I would just look at my grandmother who seemed quite unhappy and her older brothers, Henry and Alex, who I would see in Paris, who seemed to have these amazing lives. They were both very
Mm.
wealthy. They had, kind of this wide circle of friends. Henry was very happily married. And it just seemed like that wasn't true. Like the ones who stayed
Mm.
behind seemed happier to me.
Yeah,
So I just
Mm.
thought that was interesting, and I wanted to find out what the story was.
Mm.
that's fascinating.
Truly, truly. So you also said about the book, and it made me laugh in a way that I think, only Jews can laugh. But you said you didn't want it to feel too Auschwitzy. and so can you tell us a little bit more about that and why that was important to you at the time?
Well, I mean, my it didn't help that my little sister, who I'm very close to, would always refer to it when I would tell her what I was doing. I'm going to Poland to research more. She'd go, the inevitable Holocaust book. Um, and it
Siblings are mean, aren't
It
they?
did it was just, like, it's such a, freaking cliche, like,
Mm.
yes, of course, the 3rd generation Jew goes off and does a kind of Schindler's List book, and I love Schindler's List.
Mm.
Um, but I wanted it to tell I wanted it to be the whole of the 20th century. 'Cause, the oldest brother, Henry, was born 1901, Alex died 1999. I felt there's a whole century here. I
Yeah,
don't need it to be just 1940 to 1945, like, and
Mm.
Alex's life after the war. All of their lives, but Alex's life in particular was incredible. Like, he
Mm.
became Picasso's art dealer and he had this incredibly glamorous life. And he had come from literally nothing, from living in dirt in Poland where he grew up to being this very glamorous figure. And I thought
He
that
worked with Christian Dior as well, is
so
that right?
when he moved to Paris in 1920s, he wanted to be a couturier. He didn't just want to be a little tailor in the Marais like his brother Jacques. So he set up his own couture salon, and he couldn't draw. So he hired this young wealthy man who had just been kicked out of his family because he wanted to be an artist, and that was Christian Dior. So Christian Dior was his draftsman. And then after the war, they switched in that Dior obviously became fashion designer, and
Mm.
Alex got into art. And Alex's museum was right around the corner from Dior's salon in Paris. So they stayed friends. So is this
Mm.
weird story? And also the story of Dior is so fascinating. I wanted to get that in that, he had one sister who went to a concentration camp and others who were involved in the Nazi. Like everything about France I found so fascinating
yeah,
during the war
Mm.
and after the war. The kind of the mix of collaboration and the rebellion and everything about it was interesting to me. So I wanted to tell the whole story of 20th century Jewish of a 20th
Mm.
century Jewish family.
I just wonder how you feel about it now, because obviously you wrote it in 2020. 5 years ago feels like a long time ago now, doesn't it?
It sure does. I mean, I've finished it, right? like the week before my daughter was born, and
Wow.
my daughter is now in year 2. So it does
Right.
feel like a very long time ago. And I finished it.
It's a good deadline, though, that to have.
Well, what I really didn't realize was I finished it right before COVID, which was
Right.
Right.
hugely fortunate because like all the old archive stuff, particularly in Poland, which I had to keep going to, and France, like none of that's online. I would not have been able to
Mm.
do anything. So I was and also I was during COVID, I was locked home with let's see, how old were they at the time? They were 2 4-year-olds, my 4-year-old twins, and a newborn. So I absolutely wouldn't have been able to do anything.
Yeah, yeah,
No,
yeah.
So I feel
no,
very
you
lucky
would not.
that I finished it just in time.
Yeah. And like, I mean, at the time when, the reviews were written and it was sort of talking kind of related to the anti-Semitism of the day.
Right. Yes.
And yeah, I just sort of, you were slightly ahead of the curve there, weren't you, Hadley? I mean, it's not that anti-Semitism didn't exist 5 years ago, but it feels like it
Yeah.
feels different now, right?
Yes, although in all honesty, I mean, I do sort of cop to this in the book. What motivated me to stop dicking around with the research is the technical term, and to write it
Mm-hmm.
was I was so shocked by the whole Corbyn stuff. And I think
Mm.
a lot of Jews of our generation were. And I was actually talking about this with Mark Rosenblatt the other week, who's the brilliant writer who wrote Giant, the play about Roald Dahl
Mm.
and anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
And he was saying how he was motivated to do that. Mark and I were at university together, and he was saying he was motivated to do that because he was so shocked about what he saw as the anti-Semitism scandal in the Labour Party and the stuff that kept coming out about what Corbyn was saying about Zionists and stuff. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think for a lot of us, it was a real shock, particularly those of us who work in the liberal arts, whether that's theater, media, TV. We all thought, this was the place where Jews could be. And suddenly
Mm-hmm.
you realize there's quite a lot on the progressive left who see things in a different way from you. And that was
Mm.
a real eye opener. And yeah,
Mm.
it has continued ever since.
Mm. And you wrote that brilliant essay for Jewish Quarterly
Oh,
sort of on that subject, was blindness.
yeah.
And that came out. When did that come out? At the end of 23, or was it 2024? I can't
No, wait,
remember
let's see. This is so bad. I sort of date things by my divorce. Like, was I divorced when I wrote that? Um,
now.
I think 2024? Yeah, I
Mhm,
I
think it was,
think
mhm.
I
so,
wrote
yeah.
in,
Yeah, yeah.
I
Because
think
that, I
that's right.
mean,
I think I wrote it a few months after October the 7th. So whenever it came out, it came out. But yeah, that's when I wrote it. Yeah, it has been really shocking. And I still find it frustrating. I see articles in newspapers, we know, railing on about Israel, but no acknowledgement ever of no acknowledgement of October the 7th or Hamas. And I just feel
mhm,
like when I write about, that whole issue, or when Johnny does, we always acknowledge the suffering of the Palestinians.
mhm,
We always
Yeah.
mhm,
acknowledge the
At
cruelty,
pains to, yeah.
of, certain factions of the Israeli government, et cetera, et cetera. And yet it doesn't go both ways. But at the same time, the important thing, I was actually talking about this with Johnny. I don't think he'll mind me saying this on the air. The important thing is to keep your moral compass always, and don't say like, well, that side's behaving this way, so I'm going to sink to their level. Like always,
mm,
stay true to what you see. I don't mean to like on both sides. That sounds like a negative thing now, but just like be clear in your thinking and your moral compass.
mm,
Yeah.
And yeah, and it has been horrible in some ways. I wrote about this in the essay. I take my children to Hebrew school every Saturday, and yeah, particularly after October the 7th, there were buses of people who were coming in from wherever to go on the marches, the anti-Israel marches, and they would stop outside the synagogue and shout at us. Like it
mm,
is horrible, and
mm,
um, I'm not sure if it does happen the other way in this country.
mm,
I appreciate
mm,
suffering is enormous in Gaza. No one's denying
mm.
that. But when we're talking about British Jewish experience here, I feel like sometimes it does feel like the attacks come one way, but that's a different issue.
And just to sort of look for the positive and the joy and the fun, am I
Always.
right thinking that you had a bit of a sort of October the 8th Jew experience with your local community? Like,
Oh,
did you find your Primrose Hill Jews? Primrose Hill Jews? No. I
The,
mean,
the cream.
yeah.
the creme de la creme. I can only imagine what your Friday nights are like. But am I right that you found a
Yes.
community after? Like,
We
can you tell us a
have
little bit about that?
Yeah, we have our very increasingly massive Jewish WhatsApp group, which takes in Camden, Belsize Park, I think Hampstead Jews is just too big to even fit on the WhatsApp
I
group.
was just wondering about how many celebs you might find in a Hampstead Jewish WhatsApp group. I don't know. Not that many these days?
Yeah, I have to say, I don't know how many. I don't think there's very many celebs in our group, but it's a very sweet group. And it's sort of evolved into being a neighborhood group as well as being a Jewish group. You know, obviously there was a lot of talk about when posters were being ripped down off the bridge near us and graffiti in Regent's Park and stuff. But now it's also become, I'm selling my electric bike.
So practical.
A good Jewish home.
Very sweet. And also there are really sweet things like, you know, one woman on the group, you know, she put up a sukkah in her garden, and in my home we don't really have a garden, so she was talking about that, and I asked if I could bring the kids around, so I brought the kids around to see her sukkah. So there's lots of nice, it is very neighborly feeling, which is lovely.
Great.
Because did you not know them before?
No, not at all. I mean, I knew some of them, like, you know, 3 or something, but now that it's very big. And I think a lot of, maybe a lot of North London Jews, I think, let me put it this way. I think I go to the most reformed synagogue possible in the neighborhood, and others go very properly to more observant ones. So I hadn't really crossed over so much. So now we are all mixing, and that's very nice.
I just feel like that's a real, because I've heard this in like other neighborhoods which aren't sort of predominantly Jewish, and that other WhatsApp groups sprung up, and I think it is just such a Jewish reaction to trauma and crisis is to come together and like find strength in community. So it's nice to hear about it when it pops up.
It's very sweet.
And so you must be gearing up for, what does sort of Hanukkah look like in your family now? Is it sort of Christmas-maker or more weighted one way or the other? How does that manifest?
Well, it's very easy because I do Hanukkah with the kids and then they go to their dads for Christmas. So it's very simple divide, and so the kids get everything, which is what all children want anyway. Because they also get, you know, Thanksgiving and Guy Fawkes Night in November. You know, they get all the holidays.
They get everything.
And Christmas Day happens to be a Jewish friend's birthday as well. So I always go to her house to spend the day with her for her birthday. So it'll be a nice whole holiday season all round.
I've always wanted to do the very New York thing of kind of Chinese takeout. I think you've done it before, haven't you?
We used to do it on Christmas Eve because my parents used to own a card and gift shop, and Christmas Eve was obviously the busiest day. So we used to send the staff home who were celebrating Christmas early. The 4 of us would work, and then we'd go for a Chinese. And I didn't know this was an American tradition until I lived in America, and my friends. Very American
tradition. Have you seen the film? I mean, this is not a Jewish film. This is a bad reference, but the film A Christmas Story. This is a very central film for Americans at Christmas time.
Really?
Incredibly sweet.
Who's in it?
No one famous.
Okay.
And it's unbelievably adorable, and it's played on loop on TV channels in America on Christmas Day. It's so adorable. It's about 2 little boys in like 1950s America and their family during Christmas. But anyway, it ends, for various reasons I won't get into, with all of them going to a Chinese restaurant for their Christmas dinner. And for that reason, Jews love this movie. It's like
they feel seen.
Like, they've come to our side. We got them at last. They're in the Chinese restaurant. So I strongly recommend it. It's not Jewish at all, but it's an incredibly sweet non-Christian Christmas movie, if that makes sense.
Nice.
It's just reminded me of a very tangential parallel, if that's even a possible pairing of words. But when you were talking about your very sort of glamorous French family, my grandfather, whose family were all in Poland and Europe and stuff during the Holocaust, just to take us back into the depths there.
At Christmas.
But no, he had one French sort of cousin who, well, no, he wasn't French, he was Polish, but he'd moved to Paris, was quite a bit younger, and sort of fulfilled that sort of artistic side of the family, and then came to Hollywood and directed the 3 biggest flops of all time, movie flops of all time. I think it was like Jaws 2 or 3.
Wow.
Supergirl, the original movie. And then the other one, though, was the Santa Claus movie with Dudley Moore. And it's a great film, but it was a huge flop. Yeah. That's his thing in our family, is that's the artistic side.
I love that.
The 3 biggest movie flops of it was in like a Dorling Kindersley book of lists that we had in the 90s. I remember just looking through the top 10 flops of all time and going like, oh shit, yeah, those are all the films we wanged on about.
Well, talking of Hollywood and you are also known for being a brilliant celebrity interviewer. And the thing when I started out in journalism, I went to interview a few. I think I did someone like Agnes Dean, or I don't know, I did a few things, and I found it A, so hard, and B, I just didn't love it. You love it.
I
You
love it.
love meeting and chatting celebrities, and you have the
do.
best conversation. Why do you love it so much?
I love movies. I mean, let's start
Yeah.
that way. I love movies very much, viscerally. I'm like my children and I, when the children are here, we watch a movie every day. I just make them. And when I'm on
Yeah.
my own, I watch a movie every day. And I just love meeting the people involved in making them. I really do. And I also love books, and I love meeting the people who wrote the books. I think people who do these things um, I find it very exciting. And I also just want to convey to people what it's like to be in the room with somebody. So to really transcribe exactly how they talk, try to capture something, not be hagiographic, not resort to cliche, just try to make it a very empathetic, involving read so they feel I'm sharing my excitement with them. So I only interview people I'm interested in and who I admire in any way. I mean, obviously, I appreciate that I can hear people screaming in the background going, NHS nurses are more interesting than actors. And you're absolutely right. They are. But it's a job that lets you go spend 2 hours walking around Brooklyn with Ethan Hawke, which was the last one I did, which was in the Sunday Times last week or whenever, or, to go off and interview Michael J. Fox or Judy Blume or whoever. That is a job that you think I did something amazing in my past life. And the whole idea of never meet your heroes, that has never held true for me. Meet your heroes,
Really?
I'd
Wow.
say.
That's great.
It's so much fun. And I'm very happy to make fun of myself in print, by conveying how starstruck I was. I think I went when I did Keanu Reeves for you, Abigail, and I just couldn't speak, basically. I was so overcome.
It's so good.
But
It's so
equally,
good.
I know that the interview is not about me. I'm trying to talk about this person. Also, I want to celebrate people who sometimes people might not know are worth celebrating. So, Mel Brooks would be an easy example. I think, people in America, yes, they revere Mel Brooks, and Jews here revere Mel Brooks. But people, other people, the mainstream, the goys, they might just be like, the producer's guy. And I'm trying to, this is why he's amazing. This is
Yeah.
why it's incredible what he's done. And I want to do that.
Yeah. Big them up, definitely.
Absolutely.
So sorry to ask like a really basic question, but who are the fave?
Who are the
celebrity
faves?
interviews? And then we'll get into your fave Jewish celebrity interviews, just to
Sure.
make it, back on brand.
Well, Michael J. Fox is very,
Oh.
very close to my heart. And Judy Blume. And this will overlap with the next question, but Mel Brooks is one of the ultimates for me.
So you interviewed him a couple of times, right?
3.
Wow.
And then once with Rob Reiner, is that
No, with
together?
Carl Reiner.
Oh, Carl Reiner. Sorry, of course, his dad. Yeah, that generation.
Dad.
Yeah, that was beautiful because you really captured their friendship and their relationship, which was just amazing.
It was wonderful. It was so sad because Carl died 3 months later. And up to the point where he was about to die, he was still messaging me. I've still got his messages on Twitter, wanting to do a column for Weekend Magazine.
Still grafting.
Trying to sell this to Melissa. Carl is 98 and he would like to do a column for us. And Melissa's like, Rob Reiner? And I know Carl. And I find that generation of Jewish comedians so fascinating. My theory is that they really set the tone for what all Jewish comedy is now. It was Mel Brooks, Carl Reiner, Neil Simon, Woody Allen, all working on the Sid Caesar show in America. And they really just coined this thing of making Jewishness funny as opposed to something a bit, in Brooklyn and to be pushed away, the Catskills.
Yeah.
They brought the Catskills humor, the Borscht Belt humor, and made it mainstream. And then successive generations of Jewish comedians, Seinfeld, Nora Ephron, whoever, have slightly tweaked that a bit more and a bit more. And I just, I feel like that could get lost if it's not told about. And I think it should be told about. And Mel and Woody are the last ones standing, really. And Mel is kind of better at explaining it. Well, but no, Woody's very good too. But with Woody, you have to talk about a lot of other stuff first before you can get to that skills. Whereas with Mel, you can just get right into the Borscht Belt.
Phenomenal.
Yeah. What's the most Jewish thing that's ever happened to you during an interview?
Well, probably talking about the Catskills with Mel and Carl Reiner was pretty high up there. Woody, yeah, definitely. I've interviewed Woody twice. Sitting in his, house and him talking, looking outside saying, there's where we filmed Annie Hall. He lives very close to where they filmed, where Annie lives in Annie Hall, and would talking about the making of that and talking about, I always wondered why he cast Paul Simon in that movie as the man who Annie leaves him for, which I always thought was some elaborate joke about Annie leaving one Jew for another Jew. And he was just like, no, that's just who Lorne Michaels could get for me. Overthinking. And I had a really nice time, actually. It was for you, Abigail, I think, when we did that special for Weekend Magazine of comedians and their parents. Do you remember this?
Vaguely.
And I went to LA and interviewed Sarah Silverman and her dad in Sarah Silverman's apartment. And it was so fun. It was so delightful. They were so cute together. And they were talking about Sarah's sister, who's a rabbi, and kind of making jokes about that. And that was very...
Have you seen her stand-up on her parents?
No.
She's done a whole stand-up on losing them, actually.
Dad died, and I felt very sad about that. And the other comedian who's, that's not Jewish, but I also did Adam Buxton and his dad for that special. And I was sad for him when his dad died. And I interviewed him about that. And but anyway, so lots of Jews, lots of Jews.
Yeah, because I think when you wrote a piece when you left The Guardian after 20 years, interviewing celebrities, The Guardian, you said your favourite ones were Mel Brooks, Rob Reiner, Ivor Reitman, Frank Oz, and all Jews.
That's true. Frank Oz I should have put there too. Ivan Reitman was really sad. It was shortly before he died, and he had come to England. It was during COVID, so already it was slightly stressful. He'd come with his son Jason because they'd made that Ghostbusters film together.
Yeah.
And all the things I wanted to talk to Ivan about. He was, he's an immigrant. I can't remember if he came from Hungary originally. He'd immigrated to Canada right during the war, after the war. I should know this. But it was a very traumatic childhood. And I wanted so much to talk to him about, making a movie with his son, making Ghostbusters after Harold Ramis had died, and his childhood and the Holocaust, and all these things made Ivan cry in that way that older Jews do. We're very emotional people, and the whole thing was kind of heartbreaking. And he had to keep taking breaks to go to the bathroom to cry a bit and come back out. It just felt dreadful, but he was so sweet and gave me a big hug afterwards. That was wonderful. Frank Oz was just like heaven. I really, the word, the cavelling doesn't even convey it, to meet the man who had completely constructed my childhood. I was very much raised on Sesame Street. And he is a different kind of Jew. Ivan was very, sort of sweet, all the emotions on the surface. Frank Oz is more pugilistic and, kind of like, the fighter from the street. And they were both wonderful in their ways.
Amazing
to hear about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so where do you want to?
You're highlighting a bit where it says that I've taken a shit on a lot of celebrities' toilets.
I'm just wondering how you're going to weave that in.
Yeah, Abby was sort of pointed to like, why don't you talk about that? And I was like, it seems a bit trite. After
Ivan Reitman crying about the Holocaust.
I haven't taken the shit on Ivan Reitman's toilet.
It says Steve Guttenberg. I missed out by one series having a poo on his toilet.
I work in television and have, as a result, also met lots of celebrities, but on a much sort of lesser scale, I would say.
Yeah, yours is more like logistical, like you're not doing the interviewing.
And it's often, they're often there by default. I did a lot of Through the Keyhole when we sort of brought it back, which was a lot of fun. But rather than sort of getting to know the celebrities in depth, I would often just find myself taking a shit on their toilet and being like, okay, now I can add that to the list. And Steve Guttenberg was one I sadly missed out on. And then when we were looking into your wonderful back catalogue, that's what sprang to mind. And I told Abby, and it's somehow now here in a bullet point. And I'm like, okay, I'll talk about how I nearly shat on Steve Guttenberg's
I just looked
toilet.
at you to see, like, how are you going to work that one
in? Well, it's a kind of gonzo approach to journalism, right? You're immersing yourself in their plumbing. Yes, Steve, I did on FaceTime, weirdly. It's the only interview I've ever done on FaceTime, but that's how he wanted to talk. And he was incredibly sweet, and it was sort of sad. I couldn't really understand what happened to his career. I still don't really
Yeah.
understand what happened to his career. Um, and so many of the actors I grew up revering were Jewish comedians who disappeared. And I've made
Yeah.
it like my life's mission to interview them all to ask why. So Steve Guttenberg, one, definitely. Rick
Yeah.
Moranis, another. Those were really my two major favorite celebrities when I was growing up.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
Rick
Rick
Moranis is
Moranis as
really
well.
Jewish. And
Yeah.
he made this amazing he's made 2 albums of Jewish music that are
Really?
so funny. Like, they're
Wow.
I'm gonna get the names wrong. You guys can look them up and drop it in, but it's all the songs have names like "Who's Moved My Matzah?" Like, they're all, like, jokey Tom Lehrer style Jewish songs. And so I interviewed
Wow.
him about that, which was just beyond
I
a
feel
thrill.
I
Um,
feel another book coming on, like where the Jewish comedians that disappeared. I mean,
that's
you'd be perfect on that.
Well, this is gonna be an annoying thing to say because I can't really say very much about it, but I am in the middle of writing another book that is about a Jewish celebrity who didn't disappear.
Oh,
But, I can come back on when that's finally done and out, but
oh,
I I
okay.
am
Absolutely.
writing a biography of a very famous Jewish person who's a celebrity who's dead. Um,
Right.
but it's a lot of fun, and there's lots
Oh
of
my
Jewish stuff in
goodness.
it, unsurprisingly, as well
Right.
as comedy, 80s, all my greatest hits in one
All
book.
your favourite things,
Absolutely.
I
Hadley.
know. I
Lovely.
told my
It's
friend Hugo Rifkin, who works at the Times, fellow Jew, what I was
Mhm.
doing, and he just looked at me and said really dryly, "So off-brand for you, Hadley," which made me laugh a lot because it is someone Jewish in New York in the 80s, and yeah, ticks all the boxes.
it's
Super.
funny though that going back to sort of coming full circle and going back to New York, that so we grew up in the 80s and early 90s, and so many of our reference points from movies were New York. And I remember going to visit New York the first time I ever went, and people say it's a cliche, but it was like walking around a movie set.
I
It's like, oh my
know.
god, that's from this, that's from that, that's from the other. And it seems strange now that I'm not sure my kids will have that. I mean, they're currently obsessed with K-pop Demon Hunters, so
Mm.
that's a different thing. But we've got friends who are going to New York this Christmas with their
Mm.
kids who are also quite young, and they've had to sort of give them that education of,
Yeah.
it's probably things like Home Alone for their age and
Mm.
stuff like that.
Mm.
But it seems strange that it's not necessarily the kind of cultural, kind of focus point of, this huge industry
Mm.
that I Ghostbusters in New York
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
part of my childhood, and I
Yeah.
adore it for that.
Yeah,
Mm.
I mean, they don't make movies in New York really anymore, so they
Mm.
use Glasgow instead when they want
Yeah,
to do a New
Mm.
and
York scene.
Manchester
A little bit of
sometimes as well,
Manchester, yeah,
Manchester
then
and
yeah.
Yeah.
Toronto.
Mm.
And there was a period in the 70s and 80s when it was just really easy to film in New York. And so you have all these movies, whether it's Mean Streets or Hannah and Her Sisters, Ghostbusters, um, all of which were being made in New York, or, all the Mike
Yeah.
Nichols. It's basically Mike Nichols, Rob Reiner, a bit Rob Reiner, Martin Scorsese, obviously, all the
Mhm.
SNL movies that they were making then,
Yeah.
Nora Ephron movies to a certain extent. You've Got Mail. Um, and that has just changed. I mean, it used to be you could make these
Mm.
movies, and what you'd do is you'd pay off the mall, basically, as well as successive mayors giving tax breaks. And now that just kind of doesn't happen, and it's too hard to
Mm.
shut down whole streets.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, that whole thing of when they brought back Ghostbusters, I found it. I hate that all women's Ghostbusters. I hated it because it was obviously filmed
Yeah.
on a studio lot in Los
Yeah.
Angeles,
Mm.
rather than
Mm.
them running around and you see the steam coming out of the manholes and they're going up to the New York
Mm.
Yeah.
Public Library and they're going to the plaza and this, that, and the other. Um, to not have those sightings. I was watching watching Hannah and Her Sisters the other night, and there's this scene when Diane Wiest and Carrie Fisher are walking down the street talking about a man that they both like. And they're walking down Broadway, I think, and you see all the posters for musicals and plays that were coming out in the 80s that I remember
Mm.
so clearly, like Sunday in the Park with
Mm.
Yeah.
George, Evita, Cats. And it's
Mm.
just so specific. Broadway Danny Rose, the film Carnegie Deli, they're running around downtown. Um, and all the Woody movies obviously are so New
Yeah.
York, and
Mm.
it's sort of heartbreaking that
No.
those moments aren't captured anymore for me.
I remember visiting New York and seeing steam come out of the manhole and being like, oh, so glamorous. I think I actually did take a picture of it, of like, basically like sewer emission. Is that what it is? I have no idea. It's from the subway, right?
Yeah,
the subway. I don't even know. Yeah.
And the water, towers on top of the buildings, all that.
So
yes. Mythologized, and, Woody was really the major one to do it. The beginning of Manhattan, he adored New York out of proportion. But yeah, to me, New York in my mind is, even though I lived there 2008 to 2012, again, like it's still stuck in the 1980s because that's how I see it from the movies.
Yeah, same. Bit of a different place now.
Absolutely.
Right. Shall we?
We come to Nisht for me.
We come to your Nisht for me.
Yes, I would say this is going to make me sound so grumpy and it's probably going to get me sad. But you know what is Nisht for me is all the office Christmas lunches. To me, they ruin the working day. I realize this makes me sound like such a serious, tedious working person, but meeting people for lunch always ruins the working day. I like to meet people for dinner and then I can relax, and then you can stay for 3 hours. Those work Christmas lunches, they are Nisht for me because you never get any work done. You basically have to stop work at 12. And I know that makes me sound totally boring and soulless.
No, I'm with you. And it's always a set menu as well. And it's kind of like everybody's switched off, including the kitchen staff. So it's kind of like,
the worst.
What are we doing here?
The set menu, and you don't know if you're supposed to go back to work or not. I'm almost 50 and I still haven't figured this out. Am I supposed to go back to work after the Christmas lunch? I find it so stressful, the whole thing. And then if I don't go, I think, do they think I'm not going because I'm Jewish? And then it just becomes that whole agony. The whole stress.
This is such a Jewish Nisht for me. This is so great. The overthinking. I love it so much. Everything. It's perfect.
And it's just like, am I supposed to dress up, or is that then seeing try hard? Is that being overcompensating that I'm Jewish because I'm wearing a Christmas jumper? It's just so stressful.
The politics of the Christmas jumper as a Jew who doesn't celebrate Christmas is it can be tricky.
Absolutely. But I love that thing as well of like worrying what people will think and whether they'll link it to your Jewishness.
And have we covered your heimishe flex? You remembering your Haftorah portion and giving us a sample was a good one. Have you got another one? Or is that your top one?
That is probably my top heimishe flex. So that I can still I can recite the whole thing. And weirdly, my portion this year was the portion that was read out on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. And as my rabbi in my lovely synagogue here started reading it, I just started mouthing the words along with her. And my kids were so impressed because they know that Mummy's Hebrew is basically Mummy looking at the letters and just saying it phonetically. Like I can remember all the letters and the the verbs and everything, but I don't speak it. And suddenly there I was going along with the rabbi, and I was like, at last. Cool at last.
I think when your Christmas lunches get a bit dull, you just whip that out. That's how you liven up the party.
Maybe do it to some klezmer music to really get it going.
Party piece, absolutely.
Oh, it's been so brilliant to have you on.
Yeah, thank you so much, Hadley.
We hope you've enjoyed our ridiculous sort of chat.
It was incredibly endearing. I love the Jew joy. Jew joy is what we need rather than the...
Absolutely.
Jew joy.
Yes, Jew joy. That's what we're about. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and joining us. And I hope to see you IRL very soon.
See you soon. Yeah. Bye, guys.
Lovely to meet you, Hadley. Thank you so much.
Bye
now.
Bye.
That was brilliant and really informative and interesting and
very
funny.
Fun. Very fun.
And all that remains is to say Enkelheinu Adon Olam, and we'll be back next week with something else.
Something else.
Yeah.
Something just as fun.
Just as fun.
See you then.
Bye.